If you really follow the Premier League, you know the biggest stories aren't born only on the pitch. They start much earlier, in phone calls that change destinies, in negotiations that stall over details, and in quiet decisions that end up defining an entire season. And today we have two narratives crossing paths in an almost cruel way. Manchester City still hunting for solutions, and Chelsea now holding a piece that City themselves wanted to bring to the Etihad. Behind the noise of goals, records, and chaotic matches, there's a question that won't leave the fans' minds. How can a club so dominant still be constantly trying to fix something? And the answer leads straight to the left side of defense. That position has become a point of tension, experimentation, and calculated risk. And that's where Marc Cucurella comes in. Back then, when he was still wearing Brighton's shirt, Cucurella was seen as one of the most coveted pieces in the league. It wasn't just consistency, it was intensity, rhythm, the kind of fullback who can handle a long season without losing his edge. And City, who already viewed the left flank as an area that needed correcting, looked at him as someone ready to fit into a system that demands far more than simply running as a traditional fullback. Because at City, that almost doesn't exist anymore. There, the fullback has to be a defender, a midfielder, and sometimes even a ghost attacker drifting inside. The role changes within the same match, and the club knew it. That's why, even with João Cancelo filling in on the left at certain moments, it seemed clear that was a temporary fix and not a definitive plan. Cucurella, for his part, made it clear that the opportunity shook him. The logic was simple. When one of the best teams in the world calls you and the manager is Pep Guardiola, you feel you're standing in front of a door that might never open again. He tried to push the move, tried to build the path, believed the agreement would be possible. But football can be cruel about timing. The clubs didn't reach a consensus and the window passed like a train that didn't stop at the station. And then Chelsea arrived with force, money, and urgency. When they put the offer on the table, Brighton accepted the exit route. The deal was heavy, expensive, with immediate impact, and the Spaniard went to Stamford Bridge with the expectation of justifying every penny invested. And he did. He settled in, earned his place, became a constant presence, and seems to have found a place where the club's confidence translated into minutes, prominence, and stability, to the point where there's already a scenario of a renewal being tied up, advanced talks, a feeling of continuity. For Chelsea, it's confirmation of a bet that worked. For City, there's that bitter taste of, he was supposed to be ours. Because when you face a direct title rival and see a player you tried to sign precisely to solve your own problem, the story carries a different weight. And this story becomes even more interesting when you look at what City did to deal with the same pain without Cucurella. The answer didn't come in the market, it came from within. Nico O'Reilly, a young player who grew up with a midfielder's mentality, ended up becoming a real option at left back. And here's the detail that explains a lot about how Guardiola sees football today. O'Reilly doesn't speak like someone who merely accepted an improvisation. He describes the role as a tactical puzzle with layers, moving inside when the match calls for numerical superiority, staying wide when the team needs to stretch the pitch, attacking the box at certain moments, defending in a high line at others, adjusting every step to the orders of a system that doesn't allow you to switch your brain off for even a second. The result is that he didn't just become an option, he also earned a run of games. From November onwards, he began to consolidate with full minutes, showing that City aren't simply plugging a hole. They're trying to turn a problem into a new identity solution, the kind that changes how the team organizes itself in possession and out of possession. And then the season hands you the perfect script to pull this discussion out of theory and throw it straight into the heart of the rivalry. In early January, Cucurella meets City again at the Etihad, and this clash has everything to be far more than a fixture on the calendar. It has narrative, it has the past, it has the almost, it has the sense that every tackle he makes and every run down the corridor could become a silent message saying, "You wanted me, but now I'm on the other side." But City aren't living only this tactical drama. The club are also inside a second story that says a lot about the current internal mood, how Guardiola measures the weight of youth on nights of absolute pressure. And the best proof of that came in a match that seems to have been written purely to test nerves. The game against Fulham at Craven Cottage was one of those spectacles that leaves fans torn between euphoria and fear. City built a big advantage, showed signs of total control, and suddenly saw the match turn into an emotional minefield. And it was there, in the moment when victory seemed to slip through their hands, that two young players lived the same night with completely different destinies. Rayan Cherki came on almost at the end, with short minutes, but with huge responsibility hidden inside the context. It wasn't about producing a beautiful move. It was about keeping the ball, breathing, taking oxygen away from the opponent, and Guardiola saw that clearly. The substitution looked bold, almost aggressive for someone who needed to protect a result. But the manager bet on possession quality, on the intelligence to reduce the chaos. And what followed was significant. Guardiola didn't hold back on praise. He spoke about control, maturity, the importance of those final minutes. The feeling left was that Cherki, even new to the environment, delivered exactly what the manager values most in a moment of risk: calm on the ball when everyone around is panicking. On the other side, Savinho experienced the opposite. He had a technical flash, a wicked cross that almost became a Haaland goal, showing the kind of weapon he can be. But the rest of his contribution was inconsistent. Rushed decisions, choices that gave Fulham more fuel to believe in the comeback. And at City, that matters. Guardiola doesn't usually leave messages hanging in the air when he wants to correct something. He speaks, calls you over, demands. And after the final whistle, cameras caught that moment when the manager pulls Savinho aside for a quick chat on the pitch. It wasn't a show for the media. It was a direct correction. A message from someone who knows talent has to be matched by discipline within the tactical script. Those two scenes, side by side, are almost a lesson in how Guardiola builds trust. It's not enough to be young and promising. You have to be useful in exactly the kind of minutes that break champion teams and separate genuine contenders from squads that only look strong on paper. And it's impossible to tell this without also bringing in the third piece of this same emotional board: Oscar Bob. Because if Cherki climbed and Savinho received the warning, Bob is in the most cruel chapter of elite football, the one where a player knows he has quality, the manager likes him, but the space simply doesn't appear. Bob's name carries a very strong recent memory. He had a huge moment last season, with a decisive goal that became a symbol of City's ability to win even when the match seems locked. It was the kind of moment that suggests a career explosion. But the following season brought a heavy obstacle, a leg fracture before the campaign even fully got going. When he returned, he found a different landscape: more competition, more pressure for immediate impact, less contextual patience. He showed flashes, yes. But in Guardiola's City, a flash doesn't guarantee a place. And then came hard signals: absence from matchday squads, doubts from the outside, and the sense that the path to regain trust will be longer than he imagined. Guardiola was honest, almost cold, when questioned. He said it was his decision and that someone had to be left out. And it was Bob. That simple phrase carries the weight of a squad where the margin for error is minimal and where young talent has to fight not only opponents, but the sheer depth of a team used to competing on every front. And as if that weren't enough, there's still the market noise growing in the background, with names being linked to City for January, which naturally increases the feeling of internal competition. For a young player trying to find rhythm and space again, that kind of news doesn't arrive as simple rumors. It arrives like a clock that's suddenly ticking faster. But City also know how to produce answers on the pitch. And when we talk about answers, there's no escaping the name that has become synonymous with threat in any title race: Erling Haaland. In that same electrifying game against Fulham, Haaland reached a historic Premier League milestone, the fastest to reach 100 goals in the competition. And that number isn't just archive statistics, it's a loud warning to those at the top of the table. Arsenal lead, City chase, and winter arrives with the kind of calendar that can destroy any plan. Haaland understands that perfectly. He didn't speak like someone who's comfortable. He spoke like someone ready to turn the pace up. The message was clear. The league isn't decided at Christmas. The team that survives this insane run of matches best is the one that will arrive more intact for the final stretch. And even the detail of the quick conversation between Haaland and Guardiola after the match reinforces the climate of continuous alert. It wasn't a dramatic moment like what happened in another recent game. It was a short, natural dialogue from people still processing a win that almost turned into a disaster. In practice, all of this sketches City's scenario for the coming weeks. A title fight that demands perfection, a left-back role still in transformation, young players trying to earn space under the microscope of the league's most demanding manager, and a January market that could shake up internal hierarchies even further. And that's exactly where the story becomes dangerous for rivals and intense for City fans. Because when a team lives this kind of internal tension and still keeps winning and breaking records, the implied message is frightening. The point is that these stories aren't isolated. They form a web that explains why Manchester City, even when it looks stable, lives in a state of constant correction. And when you bring together the old frustration of not managing to get Cucurella, the bold adaptation of O'Reilly, the immediate message to Savinho, the quiet rise of Cherki, and the delicate moment for Bob, you understand that this isn't just a phase of the squad, it's a snapshot of the Guardiola model. Because City don't work only with who is at their peak right now. The club works with the idea of what it will need tomorrow. And in these weeks, that tomorrow is January. Not for the luxury of a transfer window, but out of the need to fine-tune details in a period where any squad flaw turns into 2 points dropped, and 2 points dropped can cost the title. Left back is the first piece of this puzzle. The most attentive fan knows that City have had moments of improvisation down that side for different reasons across the last few cycles. Sometimes because of injury, sometimes because of tactical design, sometimes because of specific choices for big games. The interesting thing is that this position, which at many clubs would be solved with an obvious, straightforward signing, becomes a laboratory at City. With O'Reilly, the idea isn't just to fill a space. It's to create a kind of hybrid fullback who is born with a midfielder's mind. If he learns to master this role, City gains something rare. A player who understands the central logic of the system and can replicate it on the flank. And then you don't just gain a fullback, you gain a new way of controlling matches. That's why O'Reilly's own words carry so much weight. He didn't describe the role as an emergency. He described it as a complex tactical challenge, full of micro-decisions and role switches within the same move. That is Guardiola at his purest. The position is less a place on the pitch and more a set of duties that change according to the scenario. And that detail connects directly with Cucurella's past. City wanted someone who didn't just defend and cross. They wanted a player who could survive this ecosystem of variations. And Cucurella believes he had that profile. That's why his frustration sounds so human. When he said that, if necessary, he would go on his knees. The exaggeration carries an emotional truth. He saw there a chance to enter the core of one of the most dominant projects on the planet. But the real life of football doesn't wait for anyone's dream. Chelsea paid, took him, and now benefit from a player who is ready, mature, secure. And this is where the January showdown becomes a symbol of an entire era. Because it won't be just Cucurella against City, it will be Cucurella against the space he almost occupied. And in matches like that, the psychological detail is brutal. A tackle can become narrative. A clean build-out under pressure can become a headline. And City know that, on the other side, is someone who carries the perfect fuel for a big game. The desire to prove that history would have been different if club talks had ended another way. But today's City don't live off resentment. They live off response. And that response appears in the way Guardiola handled the final minutes against Fulham. Cherki was the personification of early trust. The manager, in a context where the team ran a real risk of seeing an enormous advantage turn to dust, chose someone who is still in the early chapters of his journey at the club. And the logic of that decision is simple and frightening at the same time. Guardiola preferred control to brute force. He preferred intelligent possession to physical presence. He saw in Cherki what he has seen in other rare talents throughout his career, the serenity that turns the final minutes of a chaotic game into something manageable. When a player receives praise tied to a comparison with Thiago Alcantara, it isn't just any compliment, It's a seal of cerebral quality, and that changes the boy's internal status. Because youth at City don't need only goals or dribbles to grow. They need a moment when the manager says plainly that he has seen something special, that accelerates the confidence curve and opens doors that previously seemed reserved for those who already had a long story at the club. On the other hand, the conversation with Savinho reveals the opposite mechanism of the same system. Guardiola isn't saying he's not good enough. He's saying he needs to align his talent with the team's code, and that code is merciless with poor decisions. One brilliant cross doesn't erase a run of choices that hand control to the opponent. For a winger, that's even harsher, because a winger lives off the courage to try the improbable. But at City, courage has to have logic. You can take risks as long as you take them at the right moment and with the right structure around you. That's where many young talents face a reality check. And if Savinho is in that adjustment moment, Oscar Bob is at the point where adjustment turns into loss of space. Bob's case isn't about lack of talent. It's the kind of drama that arises when football time and body time don't move together. He seemed ready to explode after the impact he made last season. But the fracture on the eve of the campaign changed everything. When he returned, there were already new battles, new options, and a team that can't wait for someone to climb back to the top slowly. Guardiola still speaks well of him, and that matters. "I have a very, very good opinion of him" isn't a stock phrase. It's a way of saying the door hasn't closed. But the problem is that while Bob tries to find the freed-up mind he needs to be decisive again, the squad clock doesn't stop. And when a manager answers my decision about leaving him out, he isn't punishing him. He's organizing priorities. In a squad this strong, someone inevitably becomes the sacrificed name. And the fact that it's Bob right now shows how much City are tightening the rotation in an attempt to stay alive on all fronts. That also explains why any rumor of an attacking arrival in January stirs the subtext of the season. It's not just about strengthening, it's about increasing internal pressure even more. And for young players like Bob and Savinho, every name linked to the club becomes an extra test that has to be passed with performance, not promise. In this scenario, Haaland emerges as the emotional anchor of the project. Because City can experiment at left back, can rotate wingers, can adjust youth and experience, but they need a fixed point of threat to get through the winter storm. And the 100-goal record isn't just a nice number. It's the sign that, even amid turbulent matches and moments of collective fluctuation, City still have a weapon that dismantles any confident title prediction too early. The most interesting thing is that Haaland didn't speak like someone chasing a golden boot. He spoke like someone who understands the weight of the run of games. He spoke about the pileup of competitions, the aggressive calendar, the danger of slipping in short weeks. And when he says the league isn't over at Christmas, the message isn't folkloric. It's strategic. That fits with Guardiola's own style. The post-Fulham behavior, for example, shows that the conversation with Haaland was short, almost routine, different from the previous episode that became a debate topic. And that indicates the manager knows how to separate emotional adjustment from tactical adjustment. When the problem is structural, the demand becomes public. When the problem is a situational detail, the conversation is simply part of the normal process. Now, what does all this point to for January? First, that City should keep testing what they already have while assessing what they still need. O'Reilly may be the most valuable internal solution of the moment because he allows the club to manage resources and still gain a piece shaped by the system itself. But that doesn't eliminate the chance of a strategic move in the window. Second, that the winger hierarchy could change quickly. Cherki, with a game of just a few minutes, has already created a wave of expectation. Savinho, with a direct message, has entered decisive territory. Bob, with the current omission, needs a careful return so he doesn't become just another promise swallowed by the competitiveness machine. Third, that the race with Arsenal will be decided far more by weekly consistency than by isolated direct head-to-heads. City seem to be building a kind of resilience that is frightening. Even in crazy games, even with moments of lost control, the team finds the path to victory. And that is what makes this phase so dangerous for whoever is top of the table. Because City, when they are comfortable, are dominant. But when they are under pressure and need to adjust in real time, they become even more unpredictable. And any rival facing an unpredictable team at a high level always runs the risk of being swept away by a winning streak that begins out of nowhere and ends with the trophy in the hands of the side that seemed to be behind. That's why when Chelsea go to the Etihad and Cucurella is on the other side, the match won't carry just 3 points. It will carry the crossed destiny of 2 decisions separated by years. It will carry the memory of what almost was, against the reality of what is now. And when Arsenal take to the pitch knowing City are just a few points away, they will realize that Haaland's statement wasn't rhetoric. It was a war warning. Before you go, I want to ask you 2 quick things. If this content helped you understand what's really behind these City stories, leave a like now because that strengthens the video a lot and helps us keep bringing complete analysis, without padding, with real context. And if you want to follow every chapter of this title race, Guardiola's decisions, the next academy tests, and everything that could explode in the January window, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any urgent updates. Because the way this season is, a single week can change the whole story.